Welcome to the System Simplified podcast, where we feature top leaders who share stories on how to successfully systemize a business. Now, let's get started with the show.
Hello, Adi Klevit here, the host of the System Simplified podcast, where I feature top founders, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders about systematizing a business. And today's episode is being brought to you by Business Success Consulting Group, where we create, document, optimize, and implement processes and procedures so businesses can grow and thrive. And today's guest is Eric Albertson. Hi, Eric.
Hello, Adi. So nice to be with you today.
Absolutely. It's great to have you. You are a recurring guest. And of course, it's very fitting because you are also a dear friend and someone that I hold in very high regard. You are an entrepreneur. You are, actually, I'm going to read what you said in terms of your bio, but you are a Fortune 500 sales and marketing leader. You are Inc. 500, that was an Inc. 500 number 89 entrepreneur and longtime EOS implementer who loves business and people. And that is very humble, Eric, because you are one of the best, if not the best, implementer and business coaches that I know. We had the pleasure of working together on different projects, and I've seen the reaction from your clients and how much you help them. And you had a long career of helping many people succeed and take their businesses to the next level. So we are going to talk today, and you are very much, you know, processes, you understand processes and the importance of them. Great advocate of it. We're going to have a fun conversation.
I'm looking forward to it, Adi. And I must put an addendum onto the very gracious bio, and that is that I am now retired in all facets. So I am fully retired. I stepped down to 50% over the last 2 years, and now at the request of both my wife and the opportunities with my sons, who are also entrepreneurs, I don't do anything outside other than for my son's artificial intelligence company.
Okay. But you're still having fun, and you know also how to retire. So we talked before about your travels and what you do. So you also are successful at retiring.
Well, I'm certainly learning a lot. So it's,
and that's a key thing for you. You love to learn, you love to read, you love to understand things. And as you said, you love business and you love people and you care about them. And I think that is a key to your success. Wouldn't you say so?
Absolutely. There are a lot of things you learn, but profound empathy for an entrepreneur, especially entrepreneurial leadership teams, what they have to contend with. And every year that I've been involved, my respect for them, my empathy for them, and my commitment to helping them get what they want out of their business has only grown. It's always sad in some ways to retire, because by the time you retire, you're kind of at the apex of those things, or at least you're still at a high level of that. And it's a great time to go out. I doubt that I would have ever lost that respect and that fondness and admiration for entrepreneurs.
Absolutely. So what are some of the key components that you found successful when coaching others?
Well, so the thing that I think is really worth calling out as a primary thing today is the topic of accountability. And I would have to say, in all honesty, early in my career, I was somewhat of a bull in a china shop. I got a lot of things done, but I broke a lot of things. And I was an entrepreneur at 18. So I think I can give myself a little grace and forgiveness for it. But over the years, particularly over the time being an EOS consultant, and then previous to that, just being a more generalized management consultant for 20 years, the thing that I looked at was that the number one issue that businesses had, and it came up in all of the issues lists for the EOS people and in a diagnosis of all of my notes with my previous management consultants, was that accountability was central to all of their major issues. And that seems like a big statement, but I come to deeply believe that. And to the degree most entrepreneurs, I'm a little bit sad to say, don't even have a clear definition for what accountability is. And they have no idea about how to get to it and manage it. And they talk about it a lot, but they're all talking past each other, particularly leadership and their employees have one definition in mind from a leadership standpoint and a radically different definition from the employee standpoint in general. And from that root flaw comes the major speed bump to achieving what they want with their entrepreneurial effort.
That's right. So let's talk about it. Let's talk about a definition of accountability. Now, if you look at the word accountability, it comes from counting, right? So like, let's say an accountant, or in the old days, if you look, probably the word probably came from Latin, and you count, somebody gives you the money, you have to give it back to them. You have to count that you didn't take any of the money away. So that's the basic of it's some kind of an imagery for what accountability is. It's there. You are able to say what it is, and you are the one who's responsible for what it is. But how do you define accountability?
Yeah, it can have a very long definition and a lot of different dimensions to it. And those have utility, but as you note, simplifying things has power. And so really in a business setting, employees agree to do certain things, and they do that in exchange for their pay. They agree to own certain things. And that's one of the things that makes, why I have referred you to virtually 100% of my clients, is because your process work clarifies, simplifies the agreements that are critical to achieving the mission that the business has in the market. It's the clearest thing that we can do to get management and leader and the team, the employees, on the same page. I do routinely when I would start with a client, and particularly one that was willing to go down the accountability exploration path, is I would have the employees put down their 5 top agreements that they understood to achieve their role and fulfill their role. And then I would have management do the same thing for each employee that directly reported to them. Over the years, there was at most a 30% overlap between what the employees thought they were accountable for and what management thought they were accountable for. And of course, this is before ADIA got involved and your firm, but there was no wonder that there was a lot of strife, tension, and frustration bidirectionally. Employees thought they'd done what they'd agreed to do. Management thought they hadn't done it. And furthermore, the employees were frustrated. How could my manager be so stupid? They set me off on this. And so that erodes trust. And really, accountability is the key to trust, bidirectional trust in an organization, as well as to performance. So just getting that clear and then maintaining it and renegotiating it as things change. When you're accountable, it's around the what is going to happen, when is it going to happen, and in what way is it going to happen. That almost never exists. If you go to a top flight company like Precision Cast Parts, which was or at least used to be a holding of Berkshire Hathaway, you cannot go to an employee and change their accountabilities unless that accountability is modified in writing. The employee is empowered to decline to change their behavior until that instruction is in writing. And of course, every high-speed entrepreneur says, oh my gosh, that's too cumbersome. And my rebuttal to that is, well, yes, but isn't them doing the wrong job or not doing the job in a what by when way that you need? That's profoundly cumbersome and has incredible waste involved, as well as frustration. So much easier to get those critical to function things down in writing and to get clear on them. And employees, even then, if they're not really clear on what the impact is on the business, what it is for them personally, what it is for their team, you're going to get a suboptimal result. So people think it's a lot of work, but it's nothing. I mean, nothing compared to the alternative of the dysfunction that ensues without that clarity and that agreement. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. So what are some of the methods that you used in order to foster that accountability, increase accountability, create culture of accountability with the companies you worked with?
Well, so what I've just said so far is all nominally useful, meaning it sounds good. If you could do it like that, it would be great. But we both know that is not a reality. So one of the first things that we do is when I'm doing this, we just face up to the fact that the employees don't know how to be accountable. They want to be, by the way. The irony is they really want to be, and that it beggars belief with most leaders. They think that most of their people just want to deflect accountability. And I see why they feel like that, but that is not what I've found. What we have to do is teach leadership to first and foremost be accountable themselves. Because if they're not, it's a guarantee that the employees won't be. And then next, we have to teach the employees. So I start off when I did this regularly, and I am writing a book about this, a book that won't be published for a long time. So I'm not trying to sell any books here. But we teach them over time because what they have to do is build up the reflexive muscle memory to handle accountability situations literally every hour of the day, and to do so in a way that doesn't blow up relationships. By the way, that's the number one fear, especially when employees are hard to get, or you've got a very specialized person that's you've been with a long time, and that maybe even you're dependent upon. If that employee leaves, you almost don't have a business. And so people don't know how to keep employees, hold an employee accountable without a profound fear that they're going to cause a big upset. And so we typically take a period of time, almost always 18 months. And that sounds horrible, but every other week, we give them an hour to 2 hours of teaching and review, and get them to turn around and teach other people accountability, what the mechanics are. We do it in a structured fashion so that gradually, kind of like the frog in the water that's gradually getting warmer and warmer, they, without even being fully conscious of it, start to become more accountable, more familiar, more able to do it without causing upset, without feeling like they're being mean to somebody else. And they begin to see the actual tangible proof that people like to be held accountable, things work better. Some have said that for every point of accountability that is held, it's worth $1,500 to the organization and 5 hours of saved time. I've heard of a wide variety of numbers, but the evidence that I've seen over doing this with many clients is that that number is not too far from the truth. Many of the clients have really deeply taken this in an industry where you wouldn't have thought it was possible, have doubled their bottom line profitability, their EBITDA, and have not only done it 1 month, 1 quarter, 1 year, but have sustained and kept growing. And so you really have to get it into your culture, and you have to hire for it. And that's really one of the biggest things, is it starts out with what EOS calls employees that get, want, and have the capacity to do the job and align with the core values that the leadership team feels are at the essence of what makes that business tick. If you don't do that, you're dead before you start. But if you do that, then you can bring those people up to reflexive mastery, in not perfection, but just a modicum of mastery of accountability. And again, I'm not trying to directly promote you. It may sound like it, but at the root of that is agreement on the processes that that employee is going to use to produce the results that they're counted on for. If we don't have that, as J. Edward Deming said, we literally don't know what we're doing, and therefore we should not expect great results. Does that make sense?
I agree. And you started when you were talking about the accountability starts with the leadership team, with the top. And I always said that also about implementing processes, because we know that the processes have to be followed by all, so then they can actually use it and have accountability. But when you have a leader that says, yeah, we know we need processes, but I'm not a process person, so we're just not going to stick to it, that's a problem, because that is where the accountability starts. You have to be accountable for your own actions. And if you demand accountability for others, you have to be accountable yourself for what you implement in the company.
Well, and a lot of the reason that leaders get into trouble is, again, they don't understand accountability. But when you've said a what by when and what way, they get caught in this trap of thinking I did it or I didn't do it. And that is a didactic, which is always a problem. There's only two answers, yes or no. And that's not real life. And they know that in their heart and soul. And so the thing that, and this is well known and been studied for decades, but it's not very broadly known, and that is that when you see that you can't fulfill an accountability, you have to renegotiate the terms. The big thing is communicate. I'm not going to be able to keep this accountability. I need to renegotiate that. It doesn't take long, but it avoids people being thwarted to do their job because someone else didn't do theirs. It also, if someone's counting on that and they're going to go to the board of directors, for example, or a customer or any of the other stakeholders, it avoids that embarrassment and that damage that can be done by that. So there's this third leg to the stool of, hey, I can see that I'm not going to be able to do that. As soon as I know when, I'll tell you, or I know when I can do it, and let's renegotiate and get a new agreement. So management often knows they will get away with blowing that up, with not keeping their word, with not renegotiating, and still holding the employees accountable for an old agreement. But they provide a bad example to the employees. I can't be held accountable, but you must. And that is poison to a culture.
It is absolutely poison. So Eric, we have entrepreneurs that are listening to us right now. I'm sure they would love to read your book when it's out. But before, we're not going to wait that long. What advice would you give them if they would like to change something about the way that they're holding accountable their employees and also themselves? Where should they start?
Great question, Adi. Anything is better than nothing. So in small steps where you find something that resonates with you as the leader, and then you do it consistently. And you start by looking to the person in the mirror in the morning and going, am I really living up to this? So make those steps small, because the number one enemy is biting off more than you can really chew, more behavior than you can really exemplify over time. There are a number of very good books. Unfortunately, every book, and I've probably read 50 books on accountability and tried to put most of them into action one way or another. And the reason I'm going to write the book is they all fall short in critical areas. But if I were to just tell people to go read one book, it would be Crucial Accountability. And it has a lot of very good things in it that I think represent reality. The key thing to know about that book is it is a book, and it is reading that book once will do very little, if anything. You have to read it, get your team to read it, and pick one or two things that you're going to begin to do consistently, and be very patient with people, and particularly be patient with yourself, because this is a fundamental change of behavior. It's frankly a fundamental change of the worldview, and just begin to do a few things differently. And if I were to start on one thing, it would be to understand how to have what we call the accountability conversation. And that is where you don't get confused between the story of what you think happened and the facts of what, as a video recorder would record them, of what actually happened. Because the fact is, most of the time, what you think happened is just a figment of your imagination. You don't really know. And that gives you the insight. When you start with facts and stay with facts, you can say, I'm beginning to wonder if this happened. Then you open the door for communication. You can really find out where, for example, the process is broken. Most processes that aren't working, the employees are too afraid to say, hey, I'm right where the rubber meets the road. There's something about this process that you don't understand yet that is counterproductive for what I think you want to achieve. But if they don't feel safe to bring that up and talk about it, you're just going to keep having this dysfunctional process mitigate your results. Does that make
Absolutely.
sense?
Yeah, it does. It does. Now, Eric, as I said, we work together on many projects. You know, I would do the processes, you would coach, you would bring me on to do the processes. What's the connection? And we touched on it, but let's really explain to our listeners the connection between having good processes and accountability, and being able to enforce or inspire, or whatever verb you want to use, but basically get accountability in the company. What is the connection?
Well, the connection is that a process is a way to achieve an outcome that is valued by the business. And so we need to agree on that. And, oh, by the way, the person that's going to actually execute the process has to understand that process, what it's intended to perceive, what the downstream effects will be, and they have to have a voice in crafting that process. A unilateral, one-sided process is almost by definition, in my experience, a flawed process, because if you don't have the person that's actually going to do it, it may be beautiful in your eyes and completely insane from the other person's. So you start off with that negotiation, and then that result, there are typically some critical to function mid-course steps that are what we would call a leading indicator that that process will be achieved on time in a what by when and what way basis. And those need to show up in a scorecard. So good scorecards are critical that let the other party, the manager, know that that process is being executed. Those scorecard elements, mid-step measurables, let people know if they're on track. And also they have to have clarity about if they're not on track, what they can do to get it back on track. And then when they report how they did, as in contrast with the goal for the completion of those steps, they know that they're going to be accountable to explain why they are not able to do that. And they're accountable to bring it up and fix that process. So this is where somebody who is capable of doing the process has got to be there, because if you ask me to go be a center on an NBA basketball team at 5'11", you're going to be disappointed because I'm not capable. So assuming that the person's capable, there very likely is a problem in the process, and they can negotiate that out. But to your point, the key moment of accountability is ideally a weekly meeting for the critical few processes that they own that let them and management know if they're on track or off track to achieve the results of the processes, and give them an opportunity to work with their management or the team that they're part of to fix that process and get it so that it can achieve the result. And then every individual in the organization has at least one measurable that they report on weekly and tells everybody involved if they are being accountable to the agreement to execute that process. Does that make sense?
Makes total sense. And it's also a matter of using the processes where you identify issues to process those issues. You mentioned it, you touched upon it, but it can be as a response to an incident of something that happened, and then you can process the issue when you're processing those issues. That if something happened, where is the process? What does the process say? Do we have to fix the process? Is it a people problem, a process problem, or both? And also hold them accountable to execute the process correctly as it is measured by the scorecard.
I think the overarching theme in this has to be that everybody feels safe to challenge the process. Not only safe, but it's an imperative to say, look, this is where I'm seeing it break. What am I missing? And I don't know how to fix that, or I do have an idea how to fix it, and feel safe to give voice to it and have their vulnerability respected and ask questions and not get frustrated. I'd say the number one problem that entrepreneurs have and owners is that they spend their life in a state of frustration, and they get short and caustic with their employees. They wipe out that safety, and the employees quickly learn to not be open and honest about what's actually going on. And that is the kiss of death for effective execution of a process and the culture of the business.
I agree. Well, Eric, I think what we promised to our listeners at the beginning came true in terms of the wealth of information that we have here and knowledge about accountability, and obviously about other topics as well, which you're probably going to be a recurring guest with more knowledge and more information that we can impart and give to our listeners. So I want to thank you very much for being a guest and sharing all your wisdom.
Adi, anytime. I love the work you do. I'm strive to be your biggest fan, and I hope the listeners of this really pay attention to this, because in the end of the day, the entrepreneurial journey is very challenging, and it's absolutely insane without great processes. So bravo to you and your team, and I hope that we get to do this again.
Absolutely. And Eric, usually I will ask my guests to share how people can get a hold of them. But now that you're retired, what if people want to ask you a question? What would they do?
Well, they could ask you the question and you could forward it over to me.
I like that.
I have a few EOS people that I have mentored that we can refer them to, that are great people that I'm in constant communication with to support them on their journey and that have been mentored by me. But other than that, I am not an option. So
okay, well, we know that's why I asked, but if you want to ask Eric a question, go ahead and ask me and I will pass it along, and I'm sure I will manage to get the answer.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks so much, Adi.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to the System Simplified podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes.